The 2024 presidential election in the United States is going to be fortified like no presidential election has been fortified in the United States ever before. It's going to make 2020 look free and fair. It's going to make 2020 look like the most secure election in American history. I see a lot of, hope, talk, discussion in general about polls, particularly general election polls, popular vote polls, head-to-head Trump versus Biden polls. And a lot of people are encouraged by how unpopular Joe Biden is, and how even in some popular vote polls, not only is Trump pretty close to Biden. There's one from the Washington Post out today, which shows Trump 10 points ahead of Biden. Now, again, this is an outlier, of course. But the fact that you are even getting outliers that are plus 10 Biden and it's not, or plus 10 Trump, and it's not even, a pollster that you would expect to be at all favorable towards Trump. So this didn't happen because they're biased towards Trump. This is giving people a lot of hope for next year's election. But at the same time, we are hearing Pennsylvania instituting automatic voter registration. Some people have theorized that perhaps Joe Biden will be pulled off the ticket, that they won't run him again in 2024, that he's too old, that he's too unpopular. Oh, Hunter has legal troubles. Folks, it doesn't matter. I mean, Joe Biden could be in a coma. As long as they have the tools to fortify the correct result, it doesn't matter whose name's on the ballot. All they have to do is produce a sufficient number of ballots so that their candidate may win. And when you consider that the results in most states are slanted heavily one way or the other, and that there's only a handful of swing states that either candidate, is going to be competing with each other in, it makes it pretty easy to try and fortify this sort of thing. Now, I keep using the word fortify. I hope you know what that's a reference to, because we're on YouTube and I'm pretty sure you're still not allowed to use the other word. But I think everyone knows what election fortification is all about. And so Pennsylvania is the first one. Second would be Michigan. And after that, maybe Arizona or Wisconsin. You lock down any of those three, or any three of those, or perhaps any two of them, and pretty sure it would be impossible for old Donaldo Trumpo to pull out a victory. Yeah, I just double-checked. I think we're pretty confident that the Democrats are going to get at least like 241 electoral votes. And then you've got the competitive states, or the swing states that are kind of toss-ups. Not necessarily toss-ups in terms of the polls, but toss-ups in that, between now and the election, we don't know how they're going to go. And pretty much Pennsylvania and one other of those states that I mentioned, maybe even Nevada would be enough to put them over the edge. Actually, no, just double-checked. Nevada is not enough. Nevada is only 6 electoral votes. So with Pennsylvania and one other swing state, whether it be Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, or Michigan, and actually just using 270 to win as a .com, which is not obviously it's not a definitive source, but it's just easy because they have the electoral map. They already have Michigan in the lean D column. But with Whitmer as governor, I don't see how any Republican is going to win Michigan going forward. I mean, think about what they already manufactured the Whitmer plot, kidnapping plot, which is completely fake, to take out, to try and take out her political enemies and discredit the Republicans. And then, of course, years later, we find out, oh, this was all fake. And a lot of us saw that immediately when the news came out right before her re-election. Or no, was it her re-election or was it the 2020 election? It was right before the 2020 election, that's right. The Whitmer kidnapping plot came out, and then she won re-election in 22. So I think Michigan is probably a lost cause. And I would not be surprised if Whitmer announced something along the lines of Pennsylvania's automatic voter registration scheme as well. Now, and after the situation in Arizona in 2022, where we saw ballots were being, mail-in ballots were just being rubber stamped. They were not being checked for signature matching at all, based on the surveillance footage that we saw. Now, some people within the system, I'm sure, were checking for signatures, but there were at least some people who were rubber stamping them and just letting any ballots through. And we know that that is how you fortify an election. You gather up a bunch of ballots, you fake them, and you put fake signatures on there. You could even sign it Mickey Mouse if you want, and they're going to get through. They're going to get counted for your candidate. And so I think that by leaving Biden, who is a dead man walking, literally, on the ballot, they're just going to be flexing their fortification prowess, and it's going to demoralize Republican voters and show them that truly they can never win. Because if you can't, quote unquote beat Joe Biden in 2024, when he is a walking cadaver, when he is very unpopular, and it appears that you've got momentum and everything on your side, then you're never going to beat the Democrats in a presidential election. Once you demoralize the opposition like that, it becomes much easier to fortify elections because they stop showing up. And so, at a certain point, you probably don't even have to do much fortification. The election just goes your way, naturally, and by wide margins. Now, Wisconsin is one state to where it looks like their election may be less fortified than in 2020. There has been some Supreme Court rulings out of there saying the things that were done in 2020 were not legal, yada, yada, yada. And you could argue, well, the state of Georgia is, controlled by Republicans still, and so they've proven that Republicans can win there. But notice it's only been certain kinds of Republicans. It's been Brian Kemp and his ilk. In other words, people who are not fond of Trump. And I'm not saying that they are going to fortify the election on behalf of the Democrats to spite Trump. I'm not saying that. I'm saying electorally, that might be the only kind of Republican that wins in Georgia because it's a cucked state. And to the extent that Democrats on the local level decide to fortify the election in Joe Biden's favor, I would expect the Republicans who are in power statewide in Georgia to turn a blind eye to that, just as they did in 2020. Now, a state that I mentioned earlier, Nevada, is a swing state, and they now have a Republican governor. So you could say, okay, well, maybe that election is going to be less fortified, perhaps, than it was in 2020, and Nevada's kind of been moving to the right over the last couple of years anyway. And so let's say that old Trump is able to pull off a win in Nevada, being the first Republican to win since, I think, W. So that would be, I think, 20 years. Is that possible? Sure. But Nevada's only 6 electoral votes, so pulling off a win there is still not going to put Trump over the edge. He needs to pick off these states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona. Let's be generous. Let's say he picks up Wisconsin too, because Wisconsin on net is less fortified than it was in 2020. Okay, let's say that. That would be 16 electoral votes total between the two of them, still way behind where Joe Biden would be if he picks off the rest of those states. Pennsylvania, to me, I don't see the path there. The elections statewide in Pennsylvania in 2022 were not promising for 2024, let's put it that way. They had a candidate for governor there who was very much closely associated with Trump, had Trump's strong support, and he did not fare well. And so I don't see how the man himself is going to make up that deficit, especially when the elections there are now controlled by the man who beat old Doug, whatever his name was, who ran for governor, who had Trump's strong support. And, Josh Shapiro, the current governor, back in 2020, I believe, he pretty much guaranteed and said, no, we'll make sure that Trump didn't win when he was the attorney general. And now he is the one who's announced that he's going to just register every single person living in the state of Pennsylvania, which frees up their name in the system. It gives them more people to pull from in which to, let's just say, fortify some mail-in ballots. Makes things much easier, makes it much harder to trace, because now they're pulling from a pool of the entire population, not just the minority, or I shouldn't say minority, not just the subset of people who are registered to vote. But, say Republican supporters and optimists, they say the Republicans are going to ballot harvest this time. They've learned their lesson from 2020. Well, the problem with Republicans learning lessons is that to the extent that they do, they're always going to be fighting the last war. Now, would I like to be proven wrong? Of course. I think that would be not only a much more exciting show, it would also be, my preferred outcome. But as of right now, the base case has to be a very pessimistic one. No other way to really look at this. And until I hear any specifics about how the Trump campaign and the RNC plan to address the issues in these states, how they plan to unfortify Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Trump, Trump is speaking out about it. He's not being silent. I will give him credit for that. That was part of what prompted this. Was I saw that Trump said something about the situation in Pennsylvania. But his legal team has not proven that they are able to litigate on election matters effectively. So I don't know. Maybe it's just to, hey, you point it out, you say, hey, this is going on, and we can't do anything about it. Maybe that's as much as his organization is able to muster, and I'm not blaming him for that. I don't know what you do, but you can't expect to win if you're not able to beat that. You need to learn to out-cheat the cheaters. In a world where fortification is the name of the game, you have to learn how to play the game better than them. The counter to Pennsylvania, their fortification efforts would be for, a Republican-controlled state like Georgia to fortify their election. And likewise, Arizona, when it was still Republican-controlled, should have fortified its elections. But instead, they let themselves lose. They let themselves lose that battle. And, once the Dems get in, essentially, they are there for life. Because once they have control of a state's government, they can fortify the elections to ensure that they never lose again. This is why you can't let them win, not even once. But I know the Republicans in Georgia, one of these states that is still Republican-controlled, the rest of them have all flipped, except for Nevada. Okay, so Nevada's the exception. Nevada might go in this other direction, especially since the new governor of Nevada, he's he should be no stranger to dirty tricks. If I remember correctly, he's associated with the mob. He helped cover up the Vegas shooting a few years ago, but perhaps his dirty tricks only go that far, towards doing favors for his political allies, his political backers. But hopefully, this kind of dirty cop becoming a governor, he will use his evil powers for good, much to the same degree that Josh Shapiro or Gavin Newsom or Kathy Hochul, any of these Democrat governors would. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.